Tech family, g'day. With me is the 2020 MacBook Pro 13, the 10th gen model with 16GB of RAM and a 1TB drive. In this video, I'm going to thoroughly review this laptop and I'm going to compare it to the Dell XPS 9300 that came out around the same time at a similar price point, as well as many other laptops including the 2020 MacBook Air. At the end, I'm going to recommend who should buy a 2020 MacBook Pro 13, and believe me, it's a lot of you, which model you should buy, and what other laptops you should consider. If at the end of this video you like what you watched, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, click the thumbs up and the notification bell. It shows your appreciation for the insane amount of time that goes into making these. Alright, let's get into it. We are going to start with performance, and let me say this laptop is a beast. It's the highest performing small laptop I've ever used. Here are the Geekbench scores, and as you can see, it's on par with the new Dell XPS 9300 and in multi-core much faster than the new quad-core MacBook Air. In Cinebench, which pushes the CPU harder, you can see it start to pull away from even the Dell XPS 9300. When you look at the clock speeds, you can see why. The 2020 MacBook Pro 13 maintained 3.2 GHz while pulling 34 watts of power. The Dell XPS 9300 maintained 2.6 GHz while pulling 25 watts, and the MacBook Air a paltry 1.5 GHz while pulling only 10 watts. Note, with an undervolt, which I'm going to talk about in a future video, I did get the XPS to maintain a slightly higher 2.8 GHz. By the way, the XPS has a couple of different thermal modes. I chose Optimize for reasons I delve into in my i5 vs i7 video. A link to that in the description below. Before we move on, let me show you something really cool. Here are the same laptops compared to the new Ryzen 4 500U CPU with 6 cores in the $650 Lenovo IdeaPad 5. As you can see, the Ryzen outperforms even this Mac, and when we look at TDP, it draws less power to achieve that. What a missed opportunity to not have put a Ryzen CPU in this laptop. Imagine if they had put the 8-core Ryzen 4 800U in here, which I believe could be cooled by this chassis. We would have had insane performance. Unfortunately, I fear I'm going to be repeating this a lot in 2020. Now, onto real-world applications. What I found when starting this laptop is this machine was surprisingly slow, but this may be something to do with my particular installation, as I found even the MacBook Air faster. That being said, I promise you this is my least important test, as most people don't restart their laptop that often, they just open the lid to wake it up. When opening a Word document, it was very fast. Now for coders, it provided super fast performance in all my tests. When starting the integrated development environment IntelliJ and doing a scan of the files, when compiling code and running the app server JBoss, and when reloading a large MySQL database. Overall, for everyday tasks and coding, I found this MacBook Pro 13 with the i5 to feel faster than the i7 version of the Dell XPS 9300. For video editors, I know there are several YouTubers out there excitedly saying that you can edit 4K video off this laptop. I caution you greatly on this. Yes, for timeline scrubbing in Premiere Pro, it did not drop many frames, which is great, but take a look at exporting to the standard H.264 format. Yes, it did handily beat the MacBook Air and the Dell XPS 9300, but compared to the MacBook Pro 16, it is almost 4 times slower. In my experience as a YouTuber, you tend to export each video several times to fine-tune it. If you are producing a couple of videos a week, this extra time will quickly add up. I would highly recommend against getting this laptop for video editing unless you are doing 1080 and only occasionally 4K. For gaming, I continue to find MacBooks offering a substantially subpar experience to Windows laptops. Many titles aren't available at all, and the ones that are, like League of Legends, I find performs worse than on a comparable Windows laptop. Plus, you have many quirks to deal with. For example, when using my external mouse, I found the cursor was jumping around a lot, making the game unplayable. I discussed this kind of thing in more depth in my video on PCs vs Macs. A link to that in the description below. Normally, Apples are known to just work. That is true in everything but gaming, where Windows PCs tend to just work. Moral of the story, if you are a gamer, regardless of casual or AAA titles, I believe you should look elsewhere. Heck, even the Dell XPS 9300, which like the Mac doesn't have a dedicated graphics card but still uses Intel's new G7 graphics, provided a much more enjoyable gaming experience. Let's go straight into heat and fan noise. I really like Apple's approach here. In everyday tasks like browsing the web or using Microsoft Office, the fans are off or run so quietly that you can't hear them. This comes at the expense of warmth on the metal chassis, which conducts heat. You can easily install third-party apps like Max Fan Control, link in the description below, to raise the fan speed for a cooler feeling laptop. Let's take a look at the fans and temperatures when under extreme load, while the CPU was running Cinebench R20. By the way, for this test I ran Cinebench 5 times to ensure the laptop was at its warmest before taking my measurements. Alright, what you see here is the laptop runs cooler on the keyboard deck and the underside of the chassis than the MacBook Air, and massively cooler than the Dell XPS 9300 by around 10 degrees Celsius. When we now look at fan noise, we can see that the Dell XPS is substantially quieter than the MacBook Pro 2020 when under intensive load. In this scenario, Dell have decided to run their fans quieter at the cost of higher chassis temperatures. Overall, I prefer Apple's approach to Dell's. You get a virtually silent operation when you need it for light to medium tasks, but in intensive tasks, when you expect it to run loud, it does. However, it's more comfortable to the touch. SSD performance is excellent. I had absolutely no Wi-Fi issues and was able to get my full 300 meg down from my internet provider with low latency. Onto the display. It's the best of the best. Here it is compared to the new XPS 9300's 4K display, which itself is an excellent panel. As you can see, the MacBook Pro 13 2020 is brighter and has better color accuracy. I continue to find Apple's choice the right one, using a panel with a resolution that is in between 1080 and 4K. This results in a sharp looking image that doesn't drain the battery as fast as a 4K panel because to reach the desired brightness, it doesn't have to push as much light through an extremely dense number of pixels. Reflections are well controlled, combined with the fact that the display is super bright means you should have no problem using it in a bright room or even outdoors. As expected for Apple, there were no dead pixels, no backlight bleeding, and there was no PWM flickering used to lower the brightness. People have asked me what PWM is and why it's bad. I'm going to post a link about it in the description below. It would have been nice to have a touchscreen, but I rarely use that feature on my XPS anyway. Overall, an excellent display. The trackpad is still best in the business. Even though PCs are catching up, Apple continues to own this category. For example, if I hold the Dell XPS at an angle that has the chassis slightly bent near the trackpad, it will sometimes get caught when I click it. Apple's trackpads, on the other hand, don't move when you click. They use haptics to make you think it's moving, so this issue would never occur. Onto the keyboard. Just like Apple owns the trackpad category, Windows owns the keyboard. Let me be clear, the Magic Keyboard is not magic. It's decent and better than the prior Butterfly keyboards, but the 1mm travel feels short and a little uncomfortable to type on, especially compared to the best laptop keyboards out there, like on Microsoft Surface Books and Lenovo's ThinkPads. If they are a 10, this laptop's keyboard is around a 6. I personally found the Dell XPS 9300 to be more satisfying to type on, and the 650 IdeaPad 515 even better than both of them. Also, I find the edge of the palm rest cut into my wrist a little when I use the laptop on my lap. This didn't happen on the MacBook Air, which has a downward slope to the laptop. On the MacBook Air 2020, I know this sounds a little crazy, but I did find it slightly more comfortable to type on than the Pro 13 and 16. Perhaps the Air has a slightly different keyboard. Heck, it has a function key row, not a touch bar. With the touch bar, I did find myself missing it when I went back to the physical function buttons of the Air, especially the ability to slide the brightness and volume up and down. It just felt dated to be pressing the function keys for such things instead of using a slider. Plus, I find more applications are implementing it in a way that is useful. For example, the video conferencing application Zoom allows me to mute myself, turn on and off the camera, and leave a meeting all from the touch bar. The physical escape key fixed one of the major gripes I had with it, and now I can definitely say I like the touch bar. Onto the speakers. I've seen a lot of excitement about them. Let me be clear. The MacBook Pro 16 speakers are out of this world, a completely different experience to any other laptop. These speakers, on the other hand, are very good, but they don't quite reach those heights. They are marginally better than the Dell XPS 9300. That laptop also has very good speakers. In fact, you'd only really notice the difference if you had them side by side. The chassis is very well constructed, but I personally believe the Alpine White Dell XPS looks better. I don't mind that the MacBook Pro 13 is substantially bigger than the XPS, as it makes it a less crammed experience to use. That being said, the Dell is lighter at 2.8 pounds compared to 3.1, but honestly, for the power and cooling in this laptop, I'd take that trade. The bezels are big for a 2020 laptop, and it would have been great to see a larger display in this chassis. Yes, the display can also be opened with one hand. The 10th gen model does have ports on both sides of the laptop, which I like, so you don't have to run the cable around the back if the outlet is on the right side. Yes, I do wish it had an SD card reader, which is a win for the XPS as it has a micro one. Battery life was a little disappointing. After watching a couple of YouTube videos and writing some scripts for an hour with brightness on the third notch from the top, I found I had 4 hours left. The Dell XPS 9300 seemed to be similar to the MacBook Pro, but the MacBook Air seemed a bit better. Please note, even though the MacBook Air has a smaller battery at 50 watts compared to the 58 in the Pro, the Air's better battery life is likely due to it having a Y series processor which consumes less power and a screen that isn't as bright. The webcam is as good as it gets for a 720 and audio is quite clear. I do wish it had the high quality 1080 that the Surface Book 2 and 3 has though. The camera doesn't have a privacy filter, which some people may find unfortunate, nor does it have facial login. That being said, the fingerprint reader works really well. I do wish they included the extension cable for the charger in the box, as it is quite short without it. The laptop was completely stable during my testing other than gaming, which caused some lockups, but as I said, I would avoid this laptop if you plan to game. I do find lots of my viewers keep Apple laptops for many years, so I would recommend the AppleCare Plus add-on for peace of mind for the first 3. And pricing. This year Apple has substantially lowered its prices for similar spec models compared to last year, which combined with the improvements they have done now makes these laptops a very solid recommendation. So let's wrap up by talking about who exactly should buy one of these and which one. The answer is everyday casual users who want something that just works without any major quirks. Also, students and definitely software developers should strongly consider these laptops. If you do want a game, even if it's casual or you plan to edit videos, you should be looking elsewhere. Let me get into a bit more detail on these recommendations. If you are on a tight budget and just doing light productivity work like Microsoft Office and browsing the web, I'd just go for the base model MacBook Air. You should be able to find it for around $900. For your use case, it has almost all the benefits of the MacBook Pro 13 that you would actually notice. It's a high quality machine with a good display, it's lighter, the keyboard is a bit more comfortable in my experience, and I found it lasts longer on battery. The only major downside is the crap cooling in the Air, so do expect to hear the Air's fan spin loudly on occasion. By the way, keep an eye out for discounts to Lenovo's X1 Carbon 7th Gen around the $1,000 mark. It's a better performing and better cooled alternative to the MacBook Air. Link to my review of that laptop in the description below. If you have a bit more money to spend, at the $1,300 price point, I'd strongly recommend you get the base version of this MacBook Pro 13 over the quad-core MacBook Air, even though the Air has 512GB of storage at this price point. If you can handle less storage, and most cloud services now let you maintain your files there rather than on your physical laptop, then the MacBook Pro substantially outperforms the Air, as it has better cooling and won't have the sudden spikes of loud fan noise that you hear on the Air. In fact, when we think about the 8th gen MacBook Pro 2020 models, you aren't really losing much by going with these versus the 10th gen. Even though the 10th gen does have better graphics, in most real-world use cases the benefit is marginal, as the better graphics are not enough to make it a viable gaming laptop nor a 4K video editing machine. Now, if you are a professional coder, especially someone who plugs their laptop into an external monitor, I would highly recommend the $1,799 version. I like that this model comes with 16GB of RAM straight out of the gate, and it has other marginal improvements like ports on both sides of the laptop, better sound, and the most power in a portable laptop. This is also the model I'd recommend for most people who want the most longevity from their laptop, or just have the money. I would not recommend upgrading to 32GB of RAM on this laptop. I feel that much RAM is out of balance with the processing power of the laptop. I'd look at the much more powerful MacBook Pro 16 instead. By the way, I would recommend the XPS 9300 over the MacBook Pro for those who want to do some casual gaming, want more portability, prefer Windows over macOS, and aren't fussy about a warm feeling laptop. At the end of the day, this is a very good device and a safe buy. This laptop really epitomizes Apple's brand of it just works. It doesn't emit distractions like coil whine or loud fan noise. Speakers are placed facing up so they aren't muffled when using it on your lap. The screen and trackpad are phenomenal. The keyboard is good enough, and it's definitely very powerful for most tasks. The only downside is it gets a bit warm, but you can control that with the fan app I mentioned. That being said, this is not one of Apple's breakthrough devices. It's not the original iPhone where Apple introduced multi-touch to the world, or even the MacBook Pro 16, a device that really pushed the envelope on what it means to be a powerful laptop in a portable form factor. We all know what Apple needed to do to get into that category of device. Yep, a Ryzen 4000 series processor and a 14-inch display with smaller bezels. Anyway, that's all for today, folks. If you like this video, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button, click the thumbs up and the notification bell. Until next time, I will catch you later.